Hi, today I'm going to start the process of revising The Princess of the Infinite, which is book 2 of the Histories of the Void Garden. The book came out in about 2018, and at the time I didn't have ProWritingAid available to me as a tool, and that's what I'm going to be using here for the revisions. ProWritingAid is a pretty amazing tool. At the minute it's still going through the process of generating reports. I've got 2 copies of the book open. One is the Kindle copy, one is the print-on-demand copy, and I'm going to be committing the changes to all 3 at the same time, just so that I can track the changes as I go, so I know that I'm not leaving one unedited. You could just go through and edit the entire document in ProWritingAid and then export the Word file, stays intact, the formatting. But the problem is I've got 2 versions of the book, and no matter what, I'd have to go back through either the print on demand and fix formatting or the Kindle version and fix formatting, because they're not the same. So you'll be seeing edits go on all 3. Straight away, it's the first, which this is the preview of the previous book, the recap. So what it's saying here is that there are 5 sentences in a row which have started with the. Now, I don't want to change this first sentence because I like the leech born. I do like that. So let's look at the rest of these sentences in this first paragraph. So the source of their immortality was variously known as the Delvers. Their immortality, let's see. Their immortality came to them. Their immortality was derived from a species of leeches which lived within them. A species variously. Right, now here we go. Known as the Delvers of the Tons of Etrusca. Their mortality was derived from a species of leeches which lived within them, a species variously known as 2 variouslies. Known as the Delvers of the Tongues of Etrusca. Constantly rebuilding and refining the bodies of the hosts. There we go, just change that. Tense of that Delvers constantly rebuilt and refined the bodies of their hosts. The Leechborn lived, I'm going to leave that one as is. This dream rather than the dream. So Leechborn had lived among us for 30,000 years. The survivors of the lost nation of Alum, the Leechborn were powerful immortal shapeshifters. Their immortality was derived from a species of leeches which lived within them, a species variously known as the Delvers of the Tongues of Etrusca. Delvers constantly rebuilt. Now, it's not spell checking that because it's still kind of going through running reports right now. It does do live, but it's doing a lot of work right now in the background. So, rebuilt and refined the bodies of the hosts. The Leechborn lived divided by the great dream, the somnamorphic, and this dream foretold the coming events. It was well coordinated. What's its problem with that? Okay, well, I did go through the process of hyphenating everything in the first book. I've just finished doing my revisions on Pyre of Dreams, which is the first book in the series, and I did go through and hyphenate hyphenatable words. I'm going to do the same with this, just for consistency's sake. Well coordinated seizure, and what's it saying there? Could be gleaned. Beyond Tina's dream. Nothing more can be gleaned. I'm going to leave that as is. It's just passive voice, but that's okay. I'm comfortable with that. Now, there's a couple of cases of italicism here. So, and there's the bolding, bold and italic. So, copying this across, I'm going to have to make sure I remember those little things. So, bold. Italicize, somnamorphicum, the great dream. Somnamorphicum again, yep, okay. think that's it. I think we've got everything there. So I'm going to copy that across to the other version, which is the Kindle. Using on the Mac, Control Option Shift V, paste without formatting. So there we go. Getting back to it. March 10th, President Tiananmen, comma along with, okay, so there should be a comma there. This intern doesn't need, this drew the attention. Okay, that's sensible. This intern, it just slows down the reading, which had been parked, van which had been parked outside the beach residence. Yeah, it works. It's passive voice, but it makes sense in context. By the time David arrived in New York with his 7-year-old daughter Stephanie, he was on death's doorstep, and unbeknownst to him, he was being followed. I'm going to change that. Yeah. There we go. During that initial, is it saying no comma there? Yeah. During that initial hectic meeting, David, Stephanie, Stanek were introduced. Yeah, that's fine. It's passive voice, but for this, I'm not too worried. There's no italicism there, so I'm just going to copy that across and copy, and I'm going to bold that first bit, March 10th. And for Kindle, I'm just making sure I don't have any spaces hanging at the end of periods. By the time David arrived, that should be fine to paste across. Yep, that's come across fine. Delete that space. And same again. We're looking okay so far. Charlene was West's neighbour and had reached the age of 85 before West turned up at a door, asked for a haircut. Yeah, haircut, one word, it's fine. Okay, copy this across. Charlene was West's neighbour. Paste, Somnium Mirificum, italicize. Copy. Now you see, I do have my system language set to US, but still Word is reverting to UK. Anyway, once David was over the initial shock, that for her part, right, becomingly short, Stan explained to the group that, doesn't need that she had been following David because she suspected that his father during the beach. Okay, that's fine. Because it's a book title. Okay, copy that across. Okay, yeah. Meanwhile, back in DC, what's it got to make of that? Hannah was being questioned by FBI agent. Again, I'm comfortable with the passive voice there. I don't think it really makes a difference. I could reword the whole sentence, but it's not necessarily. Her assistance, her help, sure. Her help and her ill-timed phone call to Stephanie's phone sufficed to put Brad Cobb. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Sufficed or sufficient to. Unnecessarily wordy. Or just put Brad Cobb on the trail. So it's corrected itself there immediately. Sufficed to. Nope, just put. Clear English. Meanwhile, no italicisms, that's fine. And meanwhile. And next bit. The next morning, the world, nothing wrong there. Okay, in light of, considering everything that was happening, let's pursue. Considering everything that was happening, yeah, that's fine. I'll just change that. Now, ideally, I want to get this up to that margin. I'm not going to go all the way up to 100%, but I'll get hopefully into the green. Grammar and spelling, I'm not far off already. so that'll be okay. Considering, yes, that was this one. Yeah, there we go. Right, and next, soon thereafter, the FBI team, led by Brad Cobb. At his side were Leechborn. Cobb was unaware of the existence of Leechborn and unaware that the team of FBI agents at his side were Leechborn. Yeah, that's fine. His Leechborn colleagues were able to could identify Stanek Thras in fight which ensued. Brad Cobb watched in dread with all the that's so a lot of this is just about easing the reading experience, taking unnecessarily wordy phrasing out of the equation. Now, is there any italicism in this one? Soon thereafter. You could argue that you could take out thereafter, just soon, but I'm going to leave it in. Soon thereafter. Later that day. I mean, actually, the events of the book take place, the first book, Pyre of Dreams, the events take place more or less over 24, 48 hours. So you could just say later that day, but it's preference. West, Charlene, Stanek, David, Stephanie, Agent Brad set off to Stanek's home in West Virginia. Their road trip was not without incident. Following a car crash, Stephanie awoke with a peculiar malady. Her eyes were destroyed and rebuilt. Okay, I'm going to leave that. That night when Julian Beach appeared on national TV, the guise of actor Sam Cushing, Stanek made a phone call. So basically what's happened in the first book is, I mean, you can read through everything I've just scrolled past, but near the end of the book, they realised that David Beach's dad had been living in the guise of a famous actor, Sam Cushing, and he went on TV and blew his cover, sort of. So, a lot of people have your back. There's many people have your back. Listen, Sam, you're a dangerous man, but you should know that if you go toe-to-toe with Tina... Well, I'm not going to change that because that's how it is written in the book. So, it's staying that way. You should stop by the Stupins Institute. That's also going to stay the same because that's how it is in the book. Right, so now we're on to the actual body of Princess of the Infinite. So here we go. Chile, 1894. She had felt such despair at first, so much time lost looking for West. West is a character name. It's not the place, the West. There's a character called West. She had felt such despair at first, so much time looking for West, because I'm going to set that as ignore, so that every time it goes through, it's not going to suggest that. And I'm going to do the same with these because it gets to be a pain when it goes back through. Anything that you've decided you're going to live with, commit to ignore, which is helpful. Ignore. As far as the Leechborn, were powerful. Yeah, Leechborn, that's right. The Leechborn, the Leechborn, Is that the one? I think it was, wasn't it? No. There you go. We're powerful. Sorry. Right, okay. Leechborn lived among us for 30,000 years. Here we go, Chile. Right. So she had felt such despair at first, so much time lost looking for West, because the world had come to feel truly empty without him. Well, had come to feel, felt, hadn't always felt. So much time looking for West because her world was truly empty without him. It just gives more weight to that, I think. Had come to feel truly empty because her world was truly empty without him. She had travelled to their home, convinced that if she could reach out far enough, she would hear him. actually hear him, be able to connect with him psychically. They have powers. Yeah. She would hear him. She pulled down the Gladium wall and lay naked on the rills, pleading to the Delvers to make her a channel for only his voice, West's voice. So, nothing wrong there. She existed without time, losing track of the days, the months she'd spent, her body wasting away. When a darkness finally awakened in her mind, it came as a manifestation of her worst dread. Not West's voice, a voice she had heard in all her bleakest hours. Danum, Precious, and everything in between. His wordless utterances inside her in the night, his tongue scraping at the walls of her will, drawing her into herself. Close her eyes. There's nothing wrong there. So, let's see. There was no italicism there, I don't think. I've just noticed as well that the first book was formatted to be justified. And for some reason, this is not. So I'm going to probably fix that as I go. I'll do that at the end. She had felt such despair. That's all fine. She existed. Now, I want something defined by this paragraph style. Right, just defining a style based on that indentation. So I can go back to this and say indented, and that would not be indented. She had felt such despair at first. Right, great. And I'll do the same on this one. I'll just redefine based on a paragraph. There we go. Right. She journeyed north, joining a small whaling vessel in the waters off the coast of Concepcion. Disembarking at Arica, from Arica, she forged into the Andes on foot, every fibre of her being thrumming with his call. Okay, so it's just... She was wretched because she was beyond her own command, and it's suggesting that could be a new sentence, a husk bent around his desire. That's, yeah, I like that. She climbed with bleeding fingers. The Delvers screaming for sustenance. Yeah, that's a good place for a semicolon. It's a sentence in its own right. It follows a sentence and it provides more clarity. When she eventually stopped, it was because there was nowhere to go, no energy to go back, and only a sheer fall into blackness ahead. Okay, I'll copy that across. Well, actually, is this all one? Yeah, it's all one section, down to sustenance, right. There was no choice to be made except that which he desired. If there was anything to recount from the fall, all of it was lost on Stanek. All of it was lost. Yeah, that's fine. I'm comfortable with that. Nothing but pain. A few seconds of falling, then something cracked, but she would be too disoriented to tell what part of her body. More falling, then some jagged edifice would rip open the skin of her hip. She would stumble on rocks and instinctively catch a finger hold, only to hang for a minute before falling yet again. When she hit the ground, she was conscious but barely, enough to imagine that the final 100 feet of the drop had managed to pulverized and crushed. The last couple of bones, obviously pulverized, crushed. Beyond that, her grip on reality found a hole. Beyond that, her grip on reality found a whole new cave system to fall into, all on its own. Yeah, okay. The darkness took on a different hue to move without any obvious cause. The darkness took on a different hue, moved with no obvious cause. Yeah, there you go. That's fine, right. So, commit those changes. His words scratched in the flesh of arterial walls, only in the language of the Delvers. Nerves firing, neurons chittering. Too fast for her to comprehend. Danum spoke to the drivers, the engineers. The vehicle was damaged goods. I'm fine with that being passive voice. Nobody did it. It's the vehicle. They knew it. She had neglected herself, neglected them, so they obeyed him, burrowing through her, shredding her, then knitting the surface of her flesh to his immense form. So the leeches are fixing her, but there's something new to it. They actually are stitching her body to the body of Danam, who she has actually fallen on. As he moved through the network of caves, his body, he's a giant beast. He's not like a normal sized guy. This is, he's a beast of the Void Garden. He is massive. So, as he moved through the network of caves, his body fed her, his little parasite, ever hungry, selling her memories for a meal. Such a warm meal, though, his blood boiling. In time, when she was whole again, he would allow her to see, but it would be many years till she would be whole again. So much for him to see through her. No comma there necessary. Okay, so much for him to see through her. So many lives lived. She's been around for 30,000 years, so literally so many lives lived. He moved mountains, drinking in the air of the new world, led by her memories. For the light of Danam shone bright on all that was seen, and shone black on all that was unseen. And within and without his light, time knew not its bounds, or so it was written. And I'm not going to change that because that is as it was written, i.e. it's coming from religious texts of sorts, which is the Book of Antrusca, which isn't here, but it is something that I started writing. So yeah, the Book of Antrusca. He had been a different god then, jealous and pernicious, but he was such because his people were a proud and learned people. Beyond Alam, he had become so much more than Danam. In humbler minds, he had learned humility. In minds deeply rooted in the spirit, mana or soul. No, that is mana. It's not a confused word. That is correct. He had learned compassion. I'm going to ignore those. So what's going on here? Well, he is realizing that the world has changed a lot while he's been buried in Chile. So he is going to use Stanek. Sorry, this is Stanek. To venture into the new world and be part of new societies that have sprung forth since he buried himself. So what it's saying there, as he moved through the mountains, drinking in the air of the new world. So he's traveling north into America and eventually will settle in Virginia, which is where Stanek's compound is. Onwards to amber waves of grain. There you go. What lessons could be gleaned from this newborn nation? Again, I'm fine with the passive voice there. He had seen the place in her memories, in the mind of the delvers. He knew it well once he arrived, because he had always known since his first dream, and he dug down, waiting for the child. Introduction done. Chapter 1, the 11th hour. She's sleeping. David cooed softly, unable to tell if Stephanie's blanket was moving. Now, it's going to say that my dialogue tags are unusual dialogue tags, and to change that, I'd be changing the bulk of the book. It's possible I'll work differently in the future, but I don't know. I may just stick with really complicated dialogue tags because it's who I am. I don't know. But we'll see. But for right now, I'm not changing the complexity of dialogue tags overall, largely for this, because it's kind of too mammoth a task. It would require an entire rewrite, and this is just revisions. She wished that she hadn't. What's it making of that? She wished she removed the word that to make. She wished she hadn't. Yeah, okay. So it's just taking out that. She wished she hadn't. Yes, unnecessary. Yes, she's sleeping. Right, Stanek walked over to the bed and rested a hand on the child's forehead. She opened her own mind up to Stephanie just for a moment. She wished she hadn't. So she's just touched Stephanie's head and regretted it because there's a psychic connection there, and she's just experienced what Stephanie is experiencing. which will be explained shortly. Yes, she's sleeping. Stannik's smile flickered. Is comma splice? Is it going to suggest a full stop here? Yes. We should leave her be. I'll set sentry alarms. I really need to show you the rest of the house. The rest of you around the house. David waited by the open bedroom door, watching Stannik stroke his daughter's head, kiss her goodnight. He felt safe. Stannik led David back downstairs to the living room, comma splice. Come on, all of you. Time for the grand tour. Come on, all of you. I'm not going to do voices, obviously. That would be ridiculous. Right, okay. She's sleeping, grand tour. Okay, that's all fine. That should... Control Shift Blue. Delete. And indent. And backspace. And the same. I know this is a bit like tedious watching me go back and forth, but I don't care. It's my party. There you go. Right, and onwards. West rubbed his arms, his eyebrows narrowing as he grimaced in the blue-white light. I feel like I should almost hyphenate blue-white. Blue-white light? Yeah, because it's, yeah. Blue-white light. Behind the clear wall, as far back as he could see, small shoots unfurled their little leafy hands. Heads of broccoli and cabbage peeked unassumingly over the edges of gel-filled containers, and all manner of greens. I'm going to leave all manner of greens and grains. Blanketed shelves which were stacked several stories high with new growth, basking in the life-giving glow of their own dedicated lamps. You going off grid? Cobb pondered, shielding his face from the special lamps. Not me, Stannik replied, still marching on, leading the others into the depths of her home. The farming complex was permanently unfinished work of art. When it was first built, she had taken regular deliveries from farmers far and wide, paying over the odds for wagon loads of feed, cattle, grain, whatever they could send. She had worked the many acres of land above, but it was never enough. She's feeding a massive beast down there. It was never enough. She bought out farm holdings, kept on the labourers, made sure they were well compensated. She compensated them well, making sure they were does that need changed? Made sure she compensated them well, making sure they were well compensated. It does get rid of passive voice. It's not really more wordy. That's fine. Making sure she compensated them well. In recent years, she'd implemented a high level of automation, always fine. This is something that ProWritingAid has taught me that I do a lot, which is managed to, started to, began to. I don't know. It's one of those things of like filter words, filter phrases that is just everywhere. So you'll see a lot of that. She'd implemented a high level of automation, always fine-tuning the process. A few years ago, she had invested in She'd invested in several emerging technologies, and with the development of these new tech sectors, the Stupens Institute had suddenly flourished from glorified storage facility to state-of-the-art repository of horticultural diversity. You do farmers markets. I'm fine with that. You do farmers markets. Cobb tried again, tapping the glass. He saw Stannik's face reflected there, her expression bordering on murderous. What's it suggesting? Oh, I've started 5 sentences in a row with he? Yes. Okay. It's suggesting Stannik's expression was bordering on murder as he saw her face there, or there was a reflection of Stannik's face on the floor. Stannik's face reflected her expression bordering on murder. The expression on Stannik's face was bordering on murder. Stannik's expression was bordering on murder. Stannik's face reflected there, her expression bordering on murder. Murderous. Cobb tried again, tapping the glass. Stein's face reflected there, her expression bordering on murderous. He nodded up, thinking of their brief interrupted kiss. Yeah, they kissed at the end of the first book, Cobb and Stanek. He nodded up, thinking of their brief interrupted kiss, uncertain if what he was witnessing now was a flash of real anger, genuine anger. Can use a stronger adjective than real, genuine anger. Yeah, sure. He'd seen the true ferocity of her fury only briefly when his FBI squad had turned up at West's apartment. He'd seen, he'd watched, he tried. Okay. As he watched her walk, he tried to put the violence out of his head. Yeah. As he watched her walk, he tried to put the violence, her violence, makes it a little bit more specific. No. As he watched her walk, he tried to put violence out of his head. He nodded up. Okay, what's it? Is it suggesting anything for these? No. So what I'm going to do here, I think, is witnessing the true ferocity of her fury only briefly when his FBI squad had turned up at West's apartment. Semicolon. Comma. He'd watched Stanek withstood okay. So witnessing true ferocity of her fury only briefly, comma. He'd watched as Stanek had withstood a brutal assault from Agent Philip Mason, only to turn the situation around and incapacitate her attacker. It's not having a problem with that. I think that works. It's a longer sentence. It's a little bit more complicated sentence, but it means witnessing the true veracity. Okay, it doesn't like ing beginnings, which is one of the complications of getting rid of repeated, sentences with the same word. Is that one of the ways of doing that is ing beginnings, and we don't want many ing beginnings because it's going to come up in a report later and tell me I've ruined the whole book with ing beginnings. Breathe. He nodded up, thinking of the brief interrupted kiss, uncertain of what he was witnessing now was a flash of genuine anger. Let's change this to the true ferocity of her fury. The true ferocity of her fury, briefly. No, I did like that. Witnessing the true ferocity of her fury only briefly. I mean, you can have a percentage of ing starts. You just don't want it to be more than a little percent, 2%. It's at 0 right now. Let's try not to push it up too far. Witnessing the true ferocity of her fury only briefly when his FBI squad turned up at West's apartment. He'd watched as Stanek had withstood a brutal assault from Agent Philip Mason, only to turn the situation around and incapacitate her attacker. As he watched her walk, he tried to put that violence out of his head. Yeah, I like that. That works. Charlene leaned over the edge of the gantry, her stomach lurching when she realised how far down the complex extended. Full stop. Joking aside, you got enough down here to feed the 5,000 and then some. Stanek shuddered at the thought. It's a little joke for me that it's just shuddering at the thought of 5,000 of what's down there, which is one absolutely massive beast. You should install an elevator, David suggested, in what he felt sure was a helpful tone. Really not helpful. He watched as mechanical arms busied themselves, pruning, planting and harvesting. Surely an elevator wouldn't have been beyond Stanek's ability. Of course it's not. We could just jump down though, right? Cobb asked. I mean, is that not what this is about? We're like indestructible now, aren't we? This is Cobb, who has just become Leechborn, who is just getting to grips with what everything is about. The fall wouldn't kill you necessarily, Stanek replied, her tone flat, but without sustenance for the delvers, and getting rid of spaces with ellipses. If you were weak enough and immobilized, you could die. So basically you're saying if you dropped to the bottom and we didn't do anything to help you and there wasn't any food down there, you're just hitting a cold floor, the Delvers can't just sustain you from nothing. You need food. Cobb sighed, then an instinct took him and he acted upon it, mounting the thin handrail. Started to, there you go, there's me, started to, began to, managed to. He jogged along the precarious beam, light-footed, hands in his pockets. The downward spiral of the walkway, the smooth metal of the railing, and the dim lighting all conspired against him, but Cobb felt completely sure-footed. He picked up his pace, jumping a few feet through the air between strides, tapping the gantry above him with outstretched arms. He ran a few more paces, then rolled forward, tucking his head towards his chest, lifting up on his hands and walking lifting on his hands and walking hand over hand. Yeah. Okay. Come on, David, Cobb yelled. Come on, David, his voice echoing through the chamber. Show me what you're made of. David, this is why I wouldn't do talking books. I don't do voices. I mean, not that you have to do voices, but the problem is I have the temptation to do ridiculous voices. Anyway, come on, David, Cobb yelled, his voice echoing through the chamber. Show me what you're made of. I don't know whether it's just a camera thing. Could be. David leaned over the handrail and thought better of it, but then he felt a hand at the small of his back, and Charlene whispered in his ear, I bet we can give him a run for his money. The two of them climbed up on the metal bar, slowly, cautiously, and as Stanek and West watched, they took their first timid steps. David shuffled his feet, easing the ball of one foot forward, dragging the heel of his trailing foot, his arms out to the sides, his heart pounding in his throat. He watched Charlene, his eyes on her torso, her careful but steady motions. She seemed calm, and David took comfort from her stillness, centering himself on her motions. Following Charlene's lead, he took one enormous step, gigantic step. No, I think it's a little too strong. One large step, then another. Then Charlene turned about, and David panicked, his hips swaying out away from the walkway. Charlene was there for him, closing the gap between them with a graceful leap, grabbing hold of his hands tightly, grasping hold of his hands, clutching hold of his hands, gripping, grasping hold of his hands, just a little bit smoother. Punctuated by Cobb's occasional whoops and hollers, Charlene began to, initiated the process of. Charlene hummed, then sang gently, broadening his steps, pulling David slowly out of his comfort zone. Yeah, dragging David out of his comfort zone. Yeah, that works. Stanek started walking again. I do despair. West walked by his side, watching David's left foot crossing smoothly behind his right. What's up? This is just putting full stops rather than comma splices. Stanek pointed at Charlene. Full stop. Between you and me, we've sired a couple of half-baked losers. So Charlene was made by West. West gave her leeches, and she became leechborn. And David, Stanek ran into the first book and shot David in the leg and made him leechborn. We have sired a couple of half-baked losers. Charlene backstepped rhythmically, holding David's fingers loosely as her hips swayed. Hey, I heard that. Yeah, you were meant to, loser. Yes, I'm going to leave that. Should I? I meant you to. Yeah, I meant you to. I heard that. Yeah, I meant you to. I heard that. Yeah, you were. It's just natural speech. It feels more normal than any of those suggestions to me. Yeah, you were meant to, loser. What's your problem? West asked, confused. She's trying to pull a Johnny Castle. A what? Dirty Dancing? Johnny Castle? Do you not hear us singing? West laughed raucously, amused by how offended Stanek appeared to be. West laughed raucously, amused by how offended Stanek appeared to be. Cobb's footsteps clattered on the metal as he ran back up towards them. It's like a labyrinth down there. How long did it take you to dig this place out? I want to say a day, but honestly, I was kind of out of it. It's a long story. So she's been dragged back to Virginia by this giant beast, Danham, who is now living down there. And she doesn't really remember the process of digging it out. It was probably all him, but she doesn't really remember. West leaned over the railing. There's still a ways to go. Still a ways to go. West leaned over the railing. There's still ways to go. It's kind of colloquial, but I'm going to leave it because that is, like West's been around a bit. And it's just speech. I like the feel of that. Still a ways to go. Still a way to go. I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to leave it. He sensed a hesitancy. You want to give us the short version? She began, Chile, 1894. Now, that implies that she is recapping the recap, the Chile that we started the book with. I think that takes us to... So I need to italicize Dirty Dancing, and I think that's the only thing that needs italicized. I think the font sizes are changing. I'm going to need to do some formatting stuff at the end of all of this.
I'm trying to find the beginning. So there you go. West rubbed his arms. Oh, quite a good chunk there. West rubbed his arms. And down to Chile. Yeah, Dirty Dancing. Okay, let's push it down quite a bit there. So Chile 1894. That's all looking fine. West rubbed his arms. Why is that different font size? Oh well, I'll figure that out later. Dirty Dancing. Where's Dirty Dancing? There we go. And let's do the same over here. Chile 1894.
Quarter of an hour later, Stanek stood in front of a huge metal wall. He's in there. West's face was expressionless, which Stanek read as carefully contained fury. As carefully as contained. No, as carefully, contained. Does it need a comma there? Carefully contained fury. No, carefully contained fury. It doesn't need an as anyway. As carefully as contained. Read as carefully. Read as carefully contained fury. Contained fury. Carefully contained fury. Flurry. She nodded, holding a hand out towards the glass panel in the centre of the door. Charlene cleared her throat. Just to be clear now, it's not going to attack us, right? It will not attack us, right? That's not how people talk. I'm not going to do anything with that. Stanek nodded again. He's not on lockdown. Oh, my God. Lockdown wasn't even a thing when I wrote this. He's not on lockdown, but we are safe. He's quite singular in his desire. Cobb stepped back slowly. How big are we talking here? He's big. David's thoughts flicked suddenly to the scenes of the mythologue which he'd skimmed through on the hippocampal occipital parietal amygdalic repeater. This is also why I wouldn't be a good talking book reader. Hippocampal correction, as corrected in the first book. He wondered if perhaps he should have taken more time. So he's seen the Great War that brought about the collapse of Alum in the first book on a device that allows you to experience memories, dreams, etc. So he's seen something of the beasts of the mythologue, but not really this. He wondered if perhaps he should have taken more time poring over the details of West's memory. He skimmed it. He was bored. If he's anything like that thing that we saw in the Hopper, I have no comparable frame of reference, David offered, but shit is about to get real. Cobb shrugged, like, kaiju big? Godzilla? That is correct spelling. I should have just added the dictionary. Anyway, West nodded, something like that. Cobb tried to grasp it. Oh, I should point out that all of these names and things have already been added to the dictionary on here, which is why it's not trying to correct anything like that. Cobb tried to grasp the idea of being able to eat as much as he wanted, his excitement growing. So how does something even get to be that big? Cobb likes food. Charlene pointed back down the hallway they had just passed through. You noticed the food, right? Cobb pressed his point, convinced he had one. Yes, I saw the food, but I eat all the Cobb salad in the world. I am not growing up to be a big, strong boy. I'm going to explode. Again, I will not grow up. It just feels like stilted. It doesn't feel like natural speech. I'm not going to grow up to be a big, strong boy. I'm going to explode. His point being that if you eat and eat and eat, you don't get to be Godzilla size. You just... West chimed in. Nope. You would take on whatever form you decide to take. So things are different. And it is decide to take, not took. Because it's a decision. It's an active decision. So again, I'm going to ignore that. Cobb looked dubious. So I could eat a couple of tons of lettuce and take the form of a fennec fox? Stanik's hand dropped to her side. You're being obtuse. No, I'm just trying to understand. West thought about his question. You couldn't do it in a day? That's not necessarily true. I'm going to leave that as necessarily true. Stanik interrupted. It's quite possible for a horse to command the leeches to consume them almost wholly. They work fast. So what she said... So Cobb is saying, I can decide I can eat a ton of lettuce and take the form of a fennec fox, which is small. And West's saying, well, doing some calculations, you couldn't do that really quickly. And Stanik's saying, well, actually you kind of could, because the leeches can consume you if you command them to. They work fast. West waved his hands, trying to wipe away Stanik's comment. Now who's being obtuse? That's not normal. Stanik laughed, her frustration clearly mounting. Full stop. It's possible, though. He's trying to understand, and I would say that eating a couple of tons of lettuce and eating a couple of tons of lettuce... I would say that eating a couple of tons of lettuce and becoming... What happened there? A fennec fox. Yeah, I'm not good at spelling, you know. A fennec fox is preposterous, but not impossible. The more pertinent question would be whether you'd want to. Whether or not. Okay. It's possible, though. He's trying to understand, and I would say that eating a couple of tons of lettuce and becoming a fennec fox is preposterous, but not impossible. The more pertinent question would be whether you'd want to. Cobb frowned. Why wouldn't I want to? Fennec foxes are awesome. Stanik tapped her head. Cognitive scaling. It's a headache. West nodded in agreement. The loss of neurons and glial cells is a delicate matter, so any rearrangement of your brain structure is dicey. Handle with care. The loss of losing neurons. Yep. Fine. West nodded in agreement. Losing neurons and glial cells is a delicate matter, so any rearrangement of your brain structure is dicey. Handle with care, i.e., don't go from Godzilla size to fennec fox in a flash, because your brain structure is going to change, and that's not easy. Stanik looked at Charlene and David. Any more questions, or are we ready to do this? Without waiting for an answer, she slammed her hand onto the glass plate in the center of the wall, and that looks like a proper break. So I'll copy that across. The metal wall slid into the floor swiftly, silent, except for a satisfying thud once its upper edge became flush with the floor. Stanik led the way. The lights on the floor, they are in the floor, not on the floor. They're buried. They are recessed in the floor, illuminating no more than a perimeter extending a couple of feet all around her. Only a perimeter extending a couple of feet around her. David nudged Charlene. How are you going to see anything? Stanek answered. There's nothing to see. It's better this way. Believe me. There's nothing to see. It's better this way. Believe me. There's something to see. They don't want to see him. She doesn't want them to see him. It kind of doesn't want the reader to see him yet, is where we're at with this. Charlene kept her eye on West's legs, following closely. She thought it was odd that it had come to this, that she should be following him into the darkness. Following this, when really she knew so little about him. They'd spent little time alone, so there had been no real opportunity, alliteration. Not with everything that had been going on. A lifetime, yes, of course. He could have dropped her in on her life at any point. So Charlene and West. West knew Charlene when she was younger, like late teen, early 20s. But he did not pull a Twilight and, make her into a vampire when she was a kid. He left her alone to live a life, and he's come back, and they've only really known each other for a couple of days now, again, as with her as an adult. Anyway, Charlene kept her eyes on West's legs, following closely. She thought it was odd that it would come to this, that she should follow him into the darkness when really she knew so little about him. They had spent little time alone, so there'd be no proper opportunity. Not with everything that had been going on. A lifetime, yes, of course, he could have dropped in on her life at any point, but he must have had things to do. His trick had been a cruel one, though, really, turning up and robbing her of her opportunity for death when she'd been so close. Okay. We've got lots of she'd,